Hello. Oh. Welcome to Library of Peyton. I'm your host, Peyton. Sorry, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm Peyton, obviously. First off, I want to apologize because I meant to make this video a very long time ago, but I've been really depressed. Quite a big depressive episode been going through. So it's been really difficult to do anything but lay in bed and wallow in despair. But I am slowly clawing my way out of that pit of despair. We're getting there. So, what is this video? This video is a result of my current obsession, which is thrillers, specifically psychological thrillers. Is this obsession propagating my depression? That's a good question. It's possible. Dare I say likely that constantly listening to audiobooks that are about people being practically driven insane and murder and suicide and torture, it's plausible, but they are a good time in the most traumatic way you can have a good time, if that makes any sense. It probably doesn't. So I started listening to thrillers on audiobook in August is when I started, and I literally cannot stop listening to thrillers. Like, it's all I want to listen to. So I've just been listening to one after another on like 3 times speed, just grinding through thrillers. So I thought I would go through and share what I've been listening to, because if I include it in a monthly wrap-up, it's gonna be so many, and my monthly wrap-up will be an hour long, and I don't want that. I don't need that. My voice cannot handle that. I can't talk that much. I'm already starting to lose my voice. You'll hear it crack throughout the video. I think it just did it. My voice is a weak, fragile little thing. I gotta build up stamina to get there. Maybe one day I'll have one hour long videos, but not right now. So anyways, so I started listening to thrillers because for audiobooks, I like to try to diversify the genres that I read, because I mainly like to read fantasy, but I want to start reading other types of books, and I feel like audiobooks are a good way for me to get into that, because if I do get bored, it's okay, because I'm multitasking usually, and I can just kind of quickly get through a book, and if I don't like it, I can stop. I usually get them from my library, so it's not like I paid anything for it. And then if I do find that I like a certain genre, then I can start like buying books of that genre. So I feel like it's a good way to eke into new genres. So that's how I got into thrillers. Unfortunately, I have not been listening to diverse genres lately because all I have been listening to is thrillers, so might need to switch it up. Eventually I'll probably get tired, or I don't know if I'll get bored of thrillers, but it might be a little too much to handle. And as I was saying, maybe it would be a good idea for me to not listen to so many thrillers. Another great thing about thrillers is I feel like they really fit the vibe of fall. You know, you got that spooky vibe, and a lot of them are kind of dark academia as well, so it kind of blends together with the current season. So yeah, I think these are all great to maybe add to your October TBR. So the first thriller I listened to was The Maidens. This was not the one that started my obsession. I listened to this one, then I listened to kind of a few other different books, and then I went back to thrillers, and then I went down the rabbit hole of thrillers. Why did this one not spark my obsession? Because it's not that great, in my opinion. So it does have some nice dark academia vibes. It's set at Cambridge, so of course. So basically it's about this woman named Mariana. She used to go to Cambridge, now she's like a group therapist. Her husband just recently died like a year ago, so she's still dealing with that grief. Her niece Zoe, who is like her adopted daughter, practically like her and her deceased husband treated her like a daughter. She goes to Cambridge now, and one of her best friends has just died So Mariana goes to like comfort her, and then she gets it in her head that she needs to figure out what happened to this girl. So that was one thing that I found kind of unrealistic, because she's just like some random therapist that thinks that she should be in on this case because she's an aunt of a girl who's a friend of the person that died. And it just didn't really make sense to me. But the dead girl was a part of this group called the Maidens, which is basically a secret society of all females that is led by the Greek tragedy professor Fosca, which is a man, and it's just kind of ew, the maidens all following this man. It's gross. It's gross. And I don't think that would actually fly at a university. I know it's a secret society, but it wasn't that secret, and it just seems... So obviously Mariana suspects Fosca because he's a creep, and it's kind of reinforced when another maiden dies, but for some reason nobody believes her that Fosca is the person killing these people. But he does have a solid alibi, so I guess that makes sense. I don't want to like spoil too much. That's one thing about thrillers. I feel like I can't really tell you too much about them because it will spoil lots of the twists. Because some of the twists do come early, but it's still like a twist, you know? So like throughout this book, she's trying to solve these murders. She's also having issues with like group therapy members who are just showing up. There's this random man who claims to be a sidekick and says that they're gonna get married. It's kind of all over the place, but basically I just was not able to really suspend my disbelief. I think that's what you said. I think that's the phrase. So I just like couldn't get into it that much. And Mariana just made a lot of stupid decisions. Like in thrillers, yeah, people do make stupid decisions, but hers were just particularly stupid. And the end twist was just so out of pocket. I know I was a young newbie to thrillers at the time, but there was nothing that indicated that this twist would be coming. Like usually, I don't always see twists coming, but I can look back and be like, oh, the author has led all these clues to lead to this point. But this was just so random, did not expect it, didn't really like it. It wasn't like, I don't know, it was just weird. But if you really want a thriller that has somewhat dark academia vibes, go for it, try it out. If you are expecting a lot of Greek mythology-esque vibes, you're not gonna get it. It's not very prominent in the book. Moving on to the book that really started my obsession, The Last Housewife. This book is very good, and it kind of jumps back and forth between the past and the present. I'm not going to delve too much into the past because I don't want to spoil anything, but basically in college, Shay and her best friends meet this man who they are just absolutely captivated by, and they basically join like a mini cult where their whole life is basically controlled by this man, and it's very sexually oriented. That's one thing about thrillers. You need to make sure that you look up the trigger warnings if you have certain triggers, because a lot of them deal with sexual assault, murder, self-harm, suicide, all sorts of different stuff. Anyways, Shay, where did I come? Oh, there is a Laurel. So Shay and her friend Laurel end up escaping, but the other friend ends up committing suicide. So now it's like 8 years later, Shay has left New York, she's gotten married, she lives in a tiny Texas suburb, just trying to forget that part of her life. Then she's listening to this podcast of one of her old close friends, Voice Crack Water Time. She's listening to a podcast of one of her old close friends, because he has like a very popular crime podcast. And she finds out that Laurel ended up committing suicide on their college campus. So she immediately just drops everything and flies back to New York, telling her husband that she's a writer. So she tells her husband that she's just needs some inspiration for her new book. So she finds this podcast friend, and they're both kind of like, this seems a little sus, a little sus. And so they work together to unveil the truth. And this kind of requires Shay to delve deep into her past and really take a look at herself and the behaviors that have been ingrained in her from her dark past and her trauma. There's like sex cults, all sorts of crazy wild stuff. It was incredibly interesting. I would highly recommend if you're interested in like, what's that cult called? Like Nixium, something like that. If you're interested in sex cults. So next, of course, I had to read Ashley Winstead, I think that's the author's name, her debut book, which is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife. This is also super, super good. Ashley Winstead just has she's really good at just like weaving all these different pieces of a puzzle together in a way that's like seamless and makes sense, and you may not see things coming, but you can look back and be like, holy crap, it all makes sense now. So her books are very good. So this book, kind of a dark academia feel a little bit. It starts off with a college reunion. There was this group of friends, and they kind of have a dark history because one of the people in the group died back in college, and they basically all think it was one of their friends, this guy, even though he was never proven guilty. The main character, Jessica, she doesn't think that it was that friend, so she's kind of friends with him on the down low. But anyways, someone is using this reunion to get the little group together and unmask the true killer. And this book also flashes back and forth between the present, and you literally never know what to believe. Like, the main character doesn't know what to believe. She doesn't know who did it. She's like, did I do it? She's all over the place. The main character is also super interesting because she's not a good person. She's just like deeply insecure and is basically coming to this reunion. I apologize for the siren. She's just deeply insecure, and she's hoping to show her old friends how great her life is when she comes to this reunion, and just how successful she is and all this stuff. So yeah, she's just really unlikable, but you're invested in her story. Sometimes it's hard to become invested in an unlikable character, but you can really become invested in Jessica. The next one I read is called The Woman in the Window, and this book literally had me gasping out loud with some of the reveals. Like, I was brushing my teeth, listening, and I was like, oh, and my roommate was like, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, just a big plot twist, didn't expect. So basically, there's this woman, Anna. She has got some issues. She's a psychiatrist, psychologist, therapist. I don't know what the difference is between all of them, but after a traumatic event, she has become agoraphobic, so she doesn't leave her home. She's afraid of leaving her home. So with her like past job experience, she kind of helps others online on this group forum website for agoraphobes, and so she helps other people deal with their issues, but she's not really like dealing with her own. She just kind of drinks wine, takes her meds, messages people on that site, occasionally talks to her family on the phone, and also watches and films her neighbors from the window, hence The Woman in the Window. So one day she sees something happen that she was not supposed to see, and no one believes her. Everyone tries to convince her that she hallucinated from a combo of her meds and the alcohol, but she's pretty sure she saw what she saw. So she's trying to convince people that this thing happened, and she doesn't even know if she hallucinated it. It's good. I really enjoyed this one. I think there is a movie on Netflix also. I haven't watched the movie, but I feel like movies for especially psychological thrillers, I feel like they just aren't going to be able to do the book justice, because so much of the book is getting to see inside the person's head and hear their thoughts and know that they're like slowly going insane, or like think they might be going insane. That's one thing I love about thrillers, is like people, maybe they're not insane, but they like think that they're going insane because they don't even know what is going on. All right, next I listened to Here and Gone. This one was pretty good, kind of forgettable, but like I enjoyed it while I was reading it. So there's a woman, and she's fleeing her abusive husband with her kids. So they're driving through Arizona, and she gets pulled over for no apparent reason. But she's also like really nervous because she's afraid that her husband called the cops and said she kidnapped her kids or something. But this cop is just saying that she's got too heavy of a load in her car, and offers to put some of her stuff in his car, escort her to the nearest hotel where they can stay the night and get rid of some of the stuff. She, of course, wants to just keep trucking along, but she has no choice. But when the cop opens her trunk, he finds a big bag of weed, and it's enough that he has to arrest her. So he calls another cop, she takes the kids, and the woman spends a night in a jail cell. And the next day, I think it's the next day, I don't know, it doesn't really matter. She's like, where are my kids? I want my kids. And the cop's like, what kids? You didn't have kids with you. And then he's like, what did you do with your kids? So basically everyone thinks that she hurt her kids, did something, killed her kids. And so she is trying to prove that she's innocent of that the cops took her kids from her. And she's also helped by another guy who had something similar happen to him, and hears her story on the news. And so they're kind of like working together to try to find out what happened to her kids and also display her innocence. Next, I went through a little Karen Slaughter phase. So I read The Good Daughter. This follows Charlie. When she was young, her family was attacked, her mom was killed, her sister was shot in the head and buried alive. Very traumatic stuff. I really hope someone's not dying, but the sirens are getting on my last nerve. So anyways, now she's all grown up and she works with her dad as a lawyer. And one day she happens to be at a school when a shooting occurs, leaving 2 people dead and a teenage girl to blame. This somehow ties into everything that happened to her past, and it's all sorts of a wild ride. And that's really all I'm gonna say because it's very easy to spoil. Karen Slaughter is again like another person who can take all sorts of different things and connect them super well. So it's like you don't see how these things could possibly be connected, but they are, and it all weaves together seamlessly, and you're just on this crazy journey, and it's good. And I feel I enjoy Karen Slaughter's writing. I like Ashley Winstead's the best, I think, but hers is very good too. And I always feel like the dialogue it's never like cheesy or anything like that. It's good. So next I read False Witness, which, be forewarned, it has a super dark graphic first scene and emphasis on sexual abuse. And this first scene happens many years ago. And again, I don't really want to say too much because the reveals are pretty exciting in a traumatizing way. So after that scene, we kind of flash forward to the present time, and we have Lee, who is living her life as a defense attorney. She has a daughter, all that jazz. She's relatively successful, but she's hiding a pretty dark past. And so one day, someone comes to ask her to defend him in a rape case, and it turns out he is someone from her past. And it starts all these sorts of issues because she can't really say no because it would be really good for her career, and also she's low-key being threatened. So, but basically she only really has one person to turn to, and that's her estranged sister, Callie, who has basically allowed their shared dark past to kind of control her life, and she's now like a drug addict and not doing too hot. So many twists and turns, really keeps you on the edge of your seat. Would recommend. But again, that first scene especially, really scary stuff. Next, we have Pretty Girls. Again, I have to be pretty vague, but basically there were 2 sisters, Claire and Lydia. They had one sister named Julia, or their older sister, disappear when they were younger, and it's obviously traumatized their family, as you might imagine. That, along with other things that happened in the past, have definitely put a wedge between these 2 sisters. And one day, Claire and her husband are mugged, and her husband ends up dying in front of her, and then all sorts of things about her husband kind of come to light. They come to light, but they are very dark. And that's all I'm gonna say. This one, also very good, would recommend. But most of these I recommend, besides like The Maiden and yeah. Next we have My Lovely Wife. Once upon a time, there was a couple that killed someone, and then they were like, ooh, I kind of like that. And so they continue to do it. On the outside, they seem super normal. They have 2 kids, pretty normal jobs, but in their free time, they're picking out women to kill. There's so much more that I want to say, but I feel like I can't say anything without spoiling things. I will say the fact that they have kids is a super interesting aspect to the story, because So as they're killing people, they don't like kill a ton of people, but the few people they do kill, they kind of try to blame it on this like past serial killer that used to be prevalent in their town. So it's kind of like, oh, the serial killer has returned, and their daughter is absolutely terrified that she's going to be killed by this serial killer. So seeing them kind of struggle with their desire to murder people and the needs of their children is like a super interesting thing that you don't always see in a lot of thrillers, because I feel like sometimes they have kids, but kind of the kids are just like not really important. This one, the kids are definitely like up there in importance. Next, we have Gone Girl, a thriller classic. I have never seen the movie, so I feel like the experience was probably better for me because nothing was spoiled for me. But if you've seen the movie, maybe it won't be as exciting. I don't know. I don't know how similar the movie is to the book. On Nick's 5th anniversary with his wife, she disappears. Obviously, the husband did it is always everyone's immediate response, and a lot of the evidence is supporting this conclusion. Nick vehemently, and I don't know how to say it, claims he did not do it. So he's trying to find out what actually happened to his wife while also clearing his name. But the evidence that's stacked up against him just keeps growing and growing and growing, because every year on their anniversary, his wife does like a scavenger hunt. She left a scavenger hunt for him and he's following it, and it just kind of keeps showing more evidence of him being the killer or doing something to his wife. It switches between Nick and his wife's perspective. His wife's perspective is like in the past for most of it, which is very interesting. And I really like the writing in this book because they're both writers. So it's very just like entertaining to read. And it's also interesting. You really like slowly start to see the darker sides of both of the main characters, and you really don't know who or what to believe. And it's just a lot of turmoil up here trying to figure out what happened. I would highly recommend it. It is popular for a reason. Then went back to Karen Slaughter, read Girl Forgotten. Again, this is like hard to explain because she just takes so many like things that seem so random and pulls them together. But basically there's a girl named Emily, and she was brutally murdered on the night of prom nearly 40 years ago. And Andrea is a US Marshal who has been assigned in the area and has kind of a special interest in the case and is determined to find out who the killer was. So this book shows both Emily's perspective, like in the past, and Andrea's current perspective. So you kind of slowly learn more about the context of the murder, as well as like Andrea kind of figuring more and more about it and like meeting people from Emily's old life stories in the present and how they are now, and it's very intriguing. And there's also like all sorts of crazy stuff like cults, and I can't think of anything else, but there are cults, which I like reading about cults. And finally, I went back to Gillian Flynn, and read Dark Places. And this is about a girl named Libby, and when she was 7, her family was brutally murdered at the hands of her brother, who was convicted by her own testimony. 24 years later, a group comes to her. They're like a group that's weirdly obsessed with like murderers and people of that nature. Like it's like some like club basically, and there's like little groups that are obsessed with like certain murderers, and it's kind of weird. But a lot of them really are adamant that Libby's brother was not the one that committed the murders, and Libby's kind of like, I was there. And so they kind of start bringing up questions about whether he truly did it, and then she starts to question herself and what she thought was true. And so she like starts visiting her brother. You kind of see like back into the past from her brother's perspective, and then you see her trying to like figure out what's going on, and another very good one. So yeah, those are all the ones that I'm going to talk about for now. Really recommend all of the books, besides like The Maiden, not that great. I do want to read The Silent Patient still. Again, be wary of trigger warnings. A lot of these can be very dark. Please let me know if you have any recommendations for thrillers for me to read, or if you think I should check out a new genre, and if you think I should check out a new genre, what genre should that be? And do you have any recommendations for me? I would love to hear that. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here and spending this time with me. Please feel free to like, subscribe, comment if you want to. You don't have to, but it really makes my day when I see you guys like comment and stuff. So, bye.